I have two brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may.
Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone and you're watching The Daily Question. Today's question of the day: is Last Jedi Luke consistent with old trilogy Luke? Now, the reason I'm asking that question is because about a week or so back, Rian Johnson replied to another Twitter user. Now, this is what the Twitter user initially tweeted, and he was talking about The Last Jedi and Luke's characterization. It's just bad storytelling to change Luke so much and have one little flashback scene to explain why. Interestingly, that flashback scene doesn't really explain why he's changed so much. It just explains how it all unraveled and he ended up on this island, but it doesn't explain what actually caused him to be this new version of the character. As I said, I'm not against it. It's interesting and a fresh take, which is what Star Wars needs, but execution-wise, it was done poorly. And I agree with this tweeter. I think this is a very fair, a very reasoned summation of what went wrong, so badly wrong, with the portrayal of Luke in The Last Jedi. And then Rian Johnson replied with this: Luke is in fact 100% consistent with his character, not the way he's described in marketing blurbs, but his actual, based on his words and actions character from the old trilogy. I'll be at the bar if you need me. Now, I get it. People on Twitter do this kind of thing, and Rian Johnson in particular, I can understand why he's digging in more than most over The Last Jedi. He is the guy who was responsible for the worst, or certainly one of the worst films ever made in a much beloved franchise, and there's no shortage of people who are willing to remind him of his creative mistakes. And all of us, it's just human nature, we have frail egos, we don't like to be reminded of our mistakes, particularly those who are artists, who are creative people. They really invest a lot in their creativity and their creative output, and to have that challenged and to know that you've made a really big mistake and to be reminded of that, it can't be a particularly easy thing. However, Rian Johnson is flat out wrong here, and the original tweeter is absolutely right. This character is not consistent. Now, I wanted to be someone who gave Rian Johnson the benefit of the doubt, and I wanted to be fair on him, so I sat down and I spent quite a bit of time thinking about these two different versions of the character. And I thought to myself, well, what are the consistencies? Because maybe Rian Johnson is seeing something that I'm not seeing here. Here are the consistencies that I came up with. He's a Jedi, so both characters are Jedis. Although, to be fair, this new version of Luke initially is a bit of a Force agnostic, a Jedi agnostic. He's lost faith, but he is still a Jedi at his heart. He's trained as such. He's that same sort of character. He's got the same name, Luke Skywalker. He's age appropriate. He's got the same, or an appropriate sort of costume that you would expect from the character of Luke Skywalker, and he's the same sex. So you've got a lot of those sort of periphery things, this consistency there, but the most important thing of all, the characterization, there is not consistency. This is a brand new version of Luke Skywalker, and you can't blame people for getting upset for the fact that you have not shown us why the characterization is now so different than what it was the very last time we saw the character of Luke Skywalker. You've all heard the saying, I'm sure by now, show don't tell in relation to making movies. So don't just tell people stuff, you're supposed to show them that on screen. But in this scenario, this is even worse because it's not simply show don't tell that's the problem here. The problem here is show don't assume. Basically, even the defenders of The Last Jedi are left to assume lots of things about the characterization because they're not shown to us in the movie. We're not shown how it was that Luke Skywalker lost his way so badly that led him to the point where he is contemplating murdering his own nephew as he sleeps. What was it that happened to Luke that actually led up to that point? You need to show us that, because that is such a different characterization of Luke Skywalker than when we last saw him. Now, why this is such a problem is because the characterization is the heart and soul of the character. It's who they actually are. It's the meaningful part of the character. Their sex, the way they dress, the fact that they're age appropriate, that they still have some of the same traits as they had before, those things are secondary. What is engaging, what is meaningful is the characterization, the drama, the tension, the life that the character is actually experiencing, that's unfolding in this fictional world. That's the stuff that matters. And this new version of Luke Skywalker doesn't feel like Luke Skywalker. Instead, it sort of feels like some other Jedi-type character who maybe Yoda would have told Rey to go and seek out, or someone else would have said, hey, you need to go and find this guy. He's a grumpy old ex-Jedi, but maybe he can help you. It just does not feel like the same Luke Skywalker, and it's pretty simple stuff, as this tweeter has rightly pointed out. He just needed to show us that development. It needed to be better written, and it wasn't. The heart and soul has been ripped out of the character of Luke Skywalker. Heck, we've even got those comments that have been so widely publicised now, everyone's seen them, where Mark Hamill initially was saying, hold on a minute, this is not who Luke is, this is not how Luke would actually act. And to make matters worse, on top of the fact that you don't have this characterisation development actually being shown to us, you give this character, this much beloved character, this hackneyed, awful, absurd moment of final sacrifice where you effectively put him into a simulator, and then he dies outside the simulator. He's not really present. But here's the thing. Luke Skywalker exists as a character. He exists in the real world. He's not a Force ghost. He's an actual real character in the real world of Star Wars. And so as a real character, he should have fought his final battle in that real world. It should have been a real, tangible, corporeal, bodily encounter to actually make the substance and the sacrifice and everything else about it real. The fact that he didn't just sit on a lounge chair or his rock out the front in the sun and imagine himself having this fight and teleport himself in his mind there. He actually got into an uncomfortable small cockpit of a ship after he'd taken all the effort of raising it out of the ocean again, and then he flew across space and he turned up to actually see people and form meaningful, tangible connections with them and say, I'm here with you, and then fight that actual final battle. That would have been the thing to do, but he adds insult to injury by making it nothing more than a mental simulation. And then at the end, he dies from a force stroke or some other sort of bizarre, obscure thing. It doesn't have weight. It doesn't have meaning. Look, even the Wachowski brothers, when they were making the original Matrix, they clearly seemed to understand something really important. When you're dealing with like a mental simulation, which is what you've got with the Matrix, you've actually got to make the stakes feel real. They've got to be real for characters. And so, for example, when characters are fighting, you put them both into the Matrix. You don't have one in the Matrix and one out of the Matrix. He's miles away. And when you have one person out of the Matrix, you make the stakes real. Like if you get killed in the Matrix, you obviously die outside as well. So there's real stakes there, but there's none of that for this battle. Effectively, Luke steps into a Matrix, fights a battle where there's no real danger to him, and the only thing that really happens is I guess he's just old and frail and he just passes on, or is this him willingly going into the Force? It's sort of not quite 100% clear yet. If you're actually just watching this film, I guess maybe it'll be clarified in the next movie. I mean, who knows? But that just added all sorts of insult to injury. And again, it's very typical of these fundamental writing flaws. I don't think anyone begrudges Rian Johnson for the fact that he wanted to try and develop or take things in a slightly new direction. The problem was the execution. That's where the problem lies. And that tweeter was right. And Ryan, you can spend the rest of your days drinking at the bar, and no matter how drunk you get, that simple fact will not have changed. The execution was the problem, and that's why you now have this seriously divided fan base that is just so upset, especially with the way in which this much beloved central icon of the Star Wars universe, Luke Skywalker, was so badly handled in this film. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think in the comment section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please support me on PayPal or Patreon. There is a link for both in the video description below. That's right, I can hear my theme music too. I'll see you tomorrow on The Daily Question.